Dear Ms. Flick, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation to say a few words about our topic, capitalism. I mean, this is not a term that you just use in Germany. You actually have to connect it with terms like turbo, predator, or Manchester. So everything sounds negative, and then you have to say that it is the accepted social model of the social market economy. So social capitalism is not the right term either. You have to say social market economy. And as regards the question of capitalism and digitalization, I would like to take the perspective of a policymaker. Economic policy is something where capitalism is sort of transformed into social market economy. So certain precautions are made, taxes are raised, the social welfare state is expanded and regulated, competition is protected. You mentioned it, Ms. Flick. And the question is, if conditions change, does this policy still work? And as regards digitalization, I mean, this is also a new development. We don't really know what is going to happen. And for policymakers, the question is the tools that we use in order to turn capitalism into social market economy, something that we find positive in terms of the outcomes that are produced. So are these tools still appropriate given that the world is changing and digitization is happening? That is the question that sort of preoccupies all economic and financial discussions at the moment. It plays a key role in all kinds of different areas, and I travel a lot. I run around a lot. I talk to many policymakers, and what I often hear is the following. Digitalization makes huge change happen. Consequently, we need to rethink our economic policy. And if you say that you have to rethink something, it always sounds nice and it has to be praised, but it also worries me to a certain extent because I believe that this is wrong. It is true that you have to identify new developments and rethink things, but you have to make sure that you don't throw things overboard that are still important. And my concern is that we, by starting to rethink things, we do not really rethink them, but we carry all kinds of different things into economic policy because of digitalization, things that have to do with particular interests and competition. Let me share one example of the current coalition agreement with you in order to break it down to the sort of grassroots level. I will elevate the level in a second again. It says digitalization, very important. We all have to foster it. But online trading with prescription drugs, that is threatening our pharmacies in rural areas, so we have to ban it. And this has something to do with the fact that simple principles that are part of the social market economy are pushed aside. People say we are living in a strange world, there's digitalization, and then mail-order trade with prescription drugs is very, very dangerous. And therefore, we have to ban it. It's not good. By the way, we have to say that the Social Democrats have done the right thing. They said this is total nonsense. We will allow mail-order trade with prescription drugs, and the other parties then turned it around. That was just an example to highlight the issue. So I would like to share two theses with you. First, digitalization exacerbates many economic challenges, but these are challenges that we actually know. Now, these challenges are exacerbated, but they are not fundamentally changed. So this brings me to thesis number 2. The economic policy, from my point of view, should start to deal with these problems and master these challenges. And of course, you can reinvent yourself, but this is a very ambitious venture and it often fails. Having said that, it's important that you focus on trying to solve things in areas that you basically know. And let me give you a few examples. First example is increasing international mobility. This is a problem for the economic policy because the economic policy is organized nationally. It acts nationally, and international mobility creates a situation where certain things can no longer be controlled as they could be controlled, where there is less mobility. I mean, this is an issue that has been accompanying us in economic policy ever since globalization. Now, digitalization increases mobility in different ways. Here's one example. As a consequence of the digitalization of the economic sector, we see a restructuring of the capitalism away from intangible assets, stuff that creates smoke and is noisy, from intangible assets towards intangible assets. So we have patents and market and trademarks, etc. And intangible assets have totally different features than tangible ones. They are very mobile. In order to produce them, you need different people, different resources. But above all, they are very mobile. Now, we know the problem of mobility. We also have physical capital that is also mobile, at least when it's newly installed. So this is a familiar problem. And we basically know how to manage this. Solutions are not always simple. You know, the issue of tax competition. It's an old issue, but it exacerbates as a consequence of international mobility. Now, here's the second example. New technology makes physical presence superfluous or obsolete. I don't know. Yeah, most of you will know what this is. This is a videotape. I don't know whether you rented a video last time, probably 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So this is totally out because we nowadays have things like Netflix. You do streaming, so you download the movie. There's hardly anybody who buys videotapes anymore, maybe some collectors or so, but that's it. And this, of course, has implications. So the video rental stores are still there. In tax law, it creates a situation where there is a physical presence, and our tax law says if you have a video rental store in a country, then you have to declare how much money you have made in terms of yields and revenue. And if you only have a server in the US and somebody downloads something in Europe, then in Europe or in Germany, you don't have to declare taxes. And the European policymakers are very frustrated about this. So they said, let us invent something. Yesterday, we could tax video rental stores. And if they didn't pay their taxes, the store had to close. Now, this has become trickier. Having said that, let's reinvent something new, Europe said. Let's just tax the revenue of Netflix. But this deviates from established tax rules and will definitely create anger. It is like if Trump raises tariffs and taxes on German cars. It's not a friendly act, but it has the same quality. Just taxing somebody. And there are certain reasons why the video rental place pays taxes and Netflix doesn't. The video rental store, I mean, there has to be a police officer in front of it physically to make sure that nobody breaks in. So the physical presence results in a situation where the state-funded infrastructure is used. This is one justification, one reason why people say they have to pay taxes, make tax declarations, and they have to pay taxes on their profits. That is not the case with streaming. And in the end, I think it is a matter of conventions more than of situations that force you to distribute taxes in a certain manner. But problems that we have with Netflix, i.e. that we have a new technology and then people discuss like who is allowed to tax these activities, this is nothing new. The term or the law that stipulates the law of the place of the company has been amended over the years, and I think we are well advised to further develop our tax law instead of reinventing the wheel. Like a turnover tax on Netflix, a sales tax. I mean, you should cooperate here with other countries, yet it is not the solution, I think. Example 3, accelerated automation. That's also a concern that is often connected with digitalization. So in the future, we will no longer need humans to produce things. This is good because in Germany, we have a demographic problem. We are afraid of a lack of skilled labor, and we are also afraid of not needing them anymore at the same time. But if that materialized, it would be a problem for many people. It's also about needing certain skilled labor, but we don't have them. We only have people who cannot do this labor. So accelerated automation concerns people. Now, here's a text. I'm not going to read it out. Don't worry. And it basically says the following. Due to efficient machines, more and more jobs get lost. In the past, you said it, Ms. Flick. Something new happened around 1900. 38% in Germany of people worked in agriculture. Today, it is 1 or 2%. They found different jobs. But in fact, there is no guarantee that this is going to perpetuate in the future. So in the context of digitalization and automation, many people discuss whether we won't need different forms of income to make sure that people still have money. So it says here we don't know whether jobs can emerge, whether we will have enough jobs. And automation is not only happening regarding factory jobs that are automated. No, it also affects office jobs. So the industries that have a future today have only a few jobs. Traditional example is Google and Amazon. We do not have too many employees there. And especially for the unskilled and semi-skilled, it's going to be tricky. So this is a text which is absolutely topical, but it comes from 1961. In 1961, there was a commission in the US, and that was dealing with automation issues. And at the time, the recommendation was, let us introduce a basic income. Isn't that an astonishing recommendation of this commission? So you can see it's not a new problem. We have similar discussions nowadays, and so far we have not introduced a basic income, an unconditional basic income. We yet still have to think about these issues, yet they are not brand new. We have certain experiences already. And by the way, things sometimes happen differently than they had been anticipated. I don't know whether you know this from the Financial Times. It's about ATMs. With ATMs, you would say clear automation. We used to have a nice teller in the bank helping us. And if there is an ATM now, well, then it can't be good for bank jobs, for tellers working in banks. Now, if you take a look at this graph here, you can see the machines. These are the green dots. So more and more ATMs were installed in the last decades, but the number of tellers has still increased. So even if there was a direct substitution relationship, it does not ultimately happen that jobs go down. They don't count banknotes anymore, yet you still need these tellers. So automation is not always as bad as people might think. So what needs to be done? I said it already. We need to ask ourselves, how can we master challenges? How did we master challenges in the past? And we can often learn from the past. You cannot always do the same, but certain things are similar. This is a truism. An important thing is to increase ICT capabilities. At the IFO Institute, we have conducted studies that show what implications this has on income generation possibilities. It's enormous. For instance, if an average gainfully employed person in the US had ICT capacities like the average Japanese, then their income would be 8 times higher. I mean, the difference is not so big. We are talking 1 more year of capacity training. I mean, people can handle computers. I mean, this is something that goes without saying nowadays. But in German schools, for instance, we do not do enough for that. We have countries where kids start with laptops at an early age. That's not the case in Germany. And I meet thousands of students, and they come to university, and they don't even know Excel. And then I say, wow, it is great what we are doing. We want to become the leading ICT nation, but it would be good if people have heard about Excel beforehand. They cannot deal with Excel spreadsheets. So these low-hanging fruits are there, and they have to be used, and we need to harvest them. Other than that, here is another study, and I think there is an over-focus on infrastructure in Germany. It seems to be selling well politically speaking, so that people say we want glass fiber everywhere, but this is complete nonsense. Economically speaking, this is complete nonsense. Infrastructure is not the problem we have in Germany, but the take-up is the problem. So if you take a look at rankings and figures or reports of the European Commission, then you will learn that Germany is sort of mediocre when it comes to digitalization, yet when it comes to infrastructure, Germany performs pretty well. We have policymakers who have their commercial cars, then they say my mobile phone has failed, and then they say the infrastructure is bad. But that has nothing to do with reality. Of course, there are bottlenecks regarding digital infrastructure, but this is not our problem. The problem is take-up. The existing infrastructure is not used because we hamper business models. Everybody loves digitalization, but as soon as we have Airbnb, we hate it. There's the hotel lobby. So we love digitalization, but as soon as Uber comes, there are studies that show that the quality of transport with Uber is much, much better than in regular taxis. Not just a bit better, but massively better. Yet we do not like Uber, so we ban it. And this is a never-ending story. This here made me particularly angry, therefore I wrote it down. So we like digitalization, but mail-order trade with prescription drugs is very dangerous, so we have to ban it. We're not going to win digitalization if we behave like that. You don't have to be a genius to understand this in order to see that we could do very simple things in order to become better in this field. Thank you very much. And now we have Mr. Meyer-Schönberger.